founder of Ethos Network. Very excited to have this conversation on the reputation of Web3. Serp, welcome to stage with us. How are you doing, my man?
Thanks. Doing great. It's a little early, but we're hanging in there. So I'm kind of worried about my DNA now. Listening to Brett guy talk about 23, I didn't know any of these things were happening, and I also sent my DNA to 23andMe. So we're in it together now.
I don't
Literally.
remember the app being great. Like like it was cool. Like it's like, okay, cool. I'm like kind of French, kind of Irish, I think. Done. Now everyone can just like do whatever they want with my shit.
Yeah, that was like years ago too that I did it, probably almost a decade.
To your point, like with my legal hat on, I would have thought there must be something in that, like when you wrote your disclosures, when you wrote your thing, obviously that data is as sensitive now as it would have been back then. Like the concept of this data being sensitive is not something new. There must have been things in that initial agreement which said like people can't necessarily just go and put it on the blockchain if that wasn't agreed to you at that time. And if they were going to do that, I would have thought they would need to let you know that that is their intention before they go and do something that was not in the original agreement. So I don't know. That's me being a lawyer, but who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe
it's not even just the breakdown of like, oh, cool, this dude's kind of French. Like that's not even like it knows my entire family, right? Like if someone were to be malicious, right, towards me, acquire the data, they could then say like, oh, well, bread guy, let's say they know my real name, like, oh, I want to get to him. I want to like, see all the stuff that happens in Europe. They're like, okay, well, now I know his mom, I know his sister, I know his biological dad, I know his cousin, I can see that they chatted because you can actually like link up on the actual sites. Like all that shit is pretty sensitive.
It doesn't sound like it's for the blockchain necessarily.
Let's make it public.
Right. Let's make it public. Okay. Yeah, interesting. I'm just letting you know, you've got a legal pushback if you need me to push back for you. Right, let's get into it though. Serp, welcome to the show. I'm just going to introduce you properly so that everyone knows. I'm sure people do. But Serp is the founder behind Ethos Network, a decentralized trust and reputation protocol designed to bring credibility to the on-chain economy. Ethos raised a $1.7 million pre-seed round. I think it was in July 2024 from angel investors, making a point to only raise from the community without a lead. He also runs a liquid hedge fund called OX5F Capital. Curious to hear his thoughts, maybe a bit more generally on the market as well then later. And in this conversation, we'll dive into the vision for Ethos, the challenges of building a protocol for trust in Web3, and Serpent's plan to optimize the protocol moving forward, and how to make it a profitable business. Serpent, welcome. Tell us a little bit about you, maybe your history for people who don't know you before Ethos. I know there's a lot of friendtech history with you and Bread. I think that's how you guys connected maybe initially. What got you interested in this like reputation layer here?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of awesome that Bread's here because that was a lot of the inspiration originally. Like, I don't know what the chances are of Brett actually being on this space at the same time, but it ended up working out perfectly because, yeah, if you go back to look at what we were doing on friendtech, I feel like friendtech was a really interesting early insight into this idea that we could potentially measure reputation and instrument it on chain. And what I mean by that is in the friendtech days, and Bread was a big part of this, like there were dashboards where you could say, okay, this person did or didn't sell like their keys. They sold out of the like 3-3. They defected from their 3-3. And you needed those dashboards because you were trying to farm friendtech and you needed to know who to trust and who you couldn't trust. And because in friendtech, you actually tied your identity on Twitter to this wallet, you could actually for the first time see like, hey, this is what someone said on Twitter, and then this is what someone did on friendtech. And that wasn't what friendtech was trying to solve for. It wasn't like they were like, oh, we're gonna like, solve the world of credibility. They were just, it was just an app. But we made like this own game almost on top of friendtech in a way. And it gave me the first insight of like, wait a second, what if we could help, like use a lot of the stuff from friendtech and help prove who is credible by having stuff tied to your identity in Twitter and then put on chain. And how could we extend it? What would you improve about it? How would you like, make it even better than that? And so that was a lot of the original inspo. And yeah, I mean, like there's a pretty funny story behind it of like, there was a guy that Brad and I went on a space with that convinced us he like 100% understood and believed in friendtech, and that it was actually like the proof of credibility, the thing that like I'm trying to build now. And he like got everyone to like pump up his key. We all bought it afterward, and we're like, yeah, this guy totally gets it. Like, I'm gonna go buy his key and stuff. And then like a couple of days later, he just like dumped his key on our face, and we like, what the hell, man? And this was someone who had credibility before, supposedly, and he just ruined it. And you're like, wait a second, I can point to where he ruined it on chain. Like, that's actually really cool. That's a really big insight. And like, it sucks for him, but like, that was one of the things that like led us to building Ethos, was this idea that like, hey, this point in time where he screwed a bunch of people over and his identity are now tied together on chain. And so that we basically took that and ran with it.
That's super interesting. So what was the first way that you thought then to try to capture that moment? Because it sounds like there's a moment where people where people's it's like that thing that people say about people's reputation, right? It can take you a long time to build up, but you can lose it in an instant. So what was your first thought of like how to try to capture that? Because what you've built is ultimately very different to friendtech in like a number of ways, even though that was inspired from that. So what was your first thinking of like how to unpick those problems to build something that captured that?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that this is why it's so funny that Brett and I are up together. It's like Brett had this dashboard called like Brett built a product even on top of the data. And
he's got dashboards on all of us. He's got like all kinds of data sitting around there.
But the dashboard was really helpful, right? It was a way, like when you're trying to understand who you could trust and who you couldn't trust. Yeah, like there was actually the first like iteration of a credibility score is this dashboard here. If you go up a little bit, there is like the line items, and in the line items, one of the columns is like score. I think it's all the way to the right, and quality. Yeah, and so that was the inspiration of like, oh, what if you could have a credibility score, and it's based on all of these inputs.
Yeah. So just for the people so if you're watching in, you'll be able to see this dashboard on the screen. If you're just listening in, Serp, could you just take us through like, fine, we have a score here. How was the score comprised? What were maybe the key line items that added up to your score that people thought, well, this is what creates a trustworthy person?
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is Brett's score. That's what the cool thing is like,
like back then though, how was it being calculated?
Yeah. It had to do with basically everyone started creating this game of 3-3 on top of friendtech, where you buy my key, I buy your key. And 3-3 is like the prisoner's dilemma. It's the ultimate, like, if you trust me and I trust you, then like we get something out of this. But if I screw you over, then I win more. But if we both screw each other over, then we really get screwed. And so there's like defection rate, which is like people who exited a 3-3. There's 3-3 bonds, which is like people who actually like, bought each other's keys effectively. And then you had all of these different inputs of like, okay, really like defections was the main thing, I would say, like people who exited the 3-3 relationship. And yeah, like, and the data is like totally screwed now because everyone exited the 3-3 relationships. But like, yeah, that was what originally went into it. And again, like, yeah, you're right. Like Ethos now is totally different. Like there are things that we took from that. Actually, like the original part of Ethos, like I retweeted this the other day. It was like October of 23. And I was like, we need Trustpilot on top of friendtech data. And which sounded weird at the time, like, or now, because like we definitely did not build on top of friendtech, but like at the time it made sense because we needed a way to trust each other. We didn't know how we could trust other people. And it was like, we need a way to record this. It seems so easy to just like put a cliff note on chain and say, this guy's not trustworthy. And so that was really the inspiration. I was like, okay, what if we took the best things from friendtech, where like 3-3, was arguably good, arguably bad on friendtech. Like, it ended up being net bad, but it still taught us something. Buying a key and seeing who had the highest key price taught us something. And then, but I felt like it still needed that, like the quality element, the qualitative, like I need to review someone. I need to put some words against someone's name.
Got it.
I think that makes sense. Go on, Brad. I've got one, but go for it first.
Yeah, I think I was just gonna say, like I think what he's highlighting with a lot of this stuff, we're like, yeah, we were trying to approximate a lot of this shit, but there's so much nuance to all of it, right? Because like he's right, we would look at that and it's like, okay, cool, we have like bonds and like, well, I sold my keys. Like, oh fuck, I can't. Like, that's not like you're my homies. Like, dude, I needed to sell it because like the market, not because I hate you, right? Like, I just needed to make an adjustment. Or like, okay, well, what if I sell a bunch of shit rapidly? Like, okay, there's a little bit of velocity there, and it shows that like, oh, I'm dumping it, right? It's like if I'm dumping all my entire portfolio, that's probably indicative of like someone that's trying to like get the fuck out before like anyone else can notice and dump my key, kind of thing, right? It's like there's a lot of like user nuances that you couldn't actually easily quantify with that. And we were using this stuff to inform our buys, and it was like, oh, this person seems trustworthy. They're a smaller account, but they're 100% locked in. They're holding their keys, like they're trustworthy in that sense. So it's like, okay, I want to highlight people who are showing this, and then like, or maybe you're not a traditionally known name or something. So we were using it to inform our own decisions for some of the profit making, right, with key buying and whatever. And then like now in Ethos, Serpent's implemented a lot of those learnings with like, oh, I can unstake, or I can like break a bond, but like I can do it like without it having a negative effect on someone, right? Like I can actually indicate that on the platform. So it's trying to patch a lot of the holes that we had. That was, again, friendtech was an imperfect product. We were hoping it would eventually move towards this, as like we kept talking about it to try to like, hey, Racer, you have potential here. Hey, Racer, there's something here that you can actually like leverage. And then he just like went and did his own thing and schizo posted. But you know, there was potential there.
For sure. So we're going to maybe dive into more on the product side in a moment. But the thing that I'm taking away from both the things that you said for now is this connection between money and trust. And I wanted to ask maybe a more personal question for you, how you think about the connection between money and trust, even for example, in some of the assets that we display, right? So for example, you have a hoodie punk, which is, you know, a grail asset. Lots of people in our industry will go around actually aspiring to have some of those assets. And actually, I read a tweet this morning from someone who recently bought a CryptoPunk, just like detailing the way that people perceive him differently now since he's made that change. So I think this relationship between trust and money is super, super strong here. How do you think about that? And what are some of the challenges with that? Or do you just lean into that because, look, for whatever reason, that seems to be such a strong reality?
I mean, it's a tough one because it's human nature. When you scroll on Instagram and you see the guy that's talking about his Ferraris and his Lambos and stuff, like the content usually pulls you in. Why? Because it's like, oh, this guy was successful. I could be successful too. Like it's a natural thing that happens. Like it's an inherent, not quite inherent, but like it's a thing that creates credibility off the basis of like most people don't have Ferraris, right? And so you take something like a punk, and if you think about in the last NFT cycle, one of the things that was really common is people would really judge credibility based on what profile picture they were using. There would be people that'd be like, oh, punks are posting about this, or like the Spirit Azuki is talking about this today. And that was a way to build credibility. And it was actually one of our only ways to build credibility as someone that's totally anonymous, was like, hey, I'm like pocket watching, even though you're displaying it to everyone, but like I can see more about who you are. And if you have a $50,000 NFT, it speaks more than the random bot who is, you know, rocking a $4 NFT. Like, it doesn't mean that someone's perfectly credible, but like our human nature says like, that person is more successful or has had enough success where like I am going to listen to what they say because of it. And like credibility is the foundation of how we interact with each other anyways. And so like that was the starting point. The like and yeah, I mean, it's a really good point of like, when you think about having a hoodie punk or a punk in general, like what doors does it open? And sometimes they're obvious and other times they're not obvious. And it's just that like people look at your, like they look at your tweets differently, or they think about what you say differently. And like, it helps with credibility. People were tying like, oh, like, you know, the past few products have all been punks between Jeff on Hyperliquid and the guy from Kaito. Like there are a bunch of punks that are doing it now, and then they start associating those things, and it's human nature. And so when it comes to Ethos, go ahead.
No, go for it. Go for it.
I was going to say, when it comes to Ethos, like that was something I remember originally thinking, like, if you like spoof your NFT, should that count against your credibility? Like, probably, right? You're like, it's the
Probably.
people, it's the Instagram guys that are like renting a Ferrari for a day and then recording 40 videos and being like, hey, do you want to be successful like me? And people did that. People did that all the time. And so like when I think about Ethos and how it relates is like, you know, like reputation scales infinitely. It sounds weird, but like like people that are in the top 0.01% of the world of reputation, like put a president up there, or like Barack Obama or President Trump. God, I'm getting myself into a bad spot. Let me go back towards like Vitalik or something, right? Vitalik has an incredible amount of reputation compared to even anyone else in the space. And measuring that is really difficult. But like when you think of Vitalik's name, you kind of can put him in there in that category. Well, the way we've tried to do it is say like, hey, you become exemplary. You get to a stage in Ethos where you have that green border and that becomes that simple mental check. It doesn't scale infinitely, but it does help in terms of like kind of getting an idea of like who's the most reputable and who's not. And the last point I would make on that is you had originally asked like, okay, well, how does money really come into the trust equation? And it's like,
Yeah.
It does. Like trust is driven by money in a lot of cases. And, you know, we have this vouching system where you can stake your ETH against someone, and it becomes this way to say like, oh, I'm measurably, you know, people have taken money out of their bank account, put it against my name, and that means something. And if it's $20 versus $250,000, it doesn't actually change that much in Ethos, but it's shown there, and it could mean something else to someone. And so anyways, that's how I think about it. Like they are tightly intertwined, and I think you have to lean into that. The last caveat, I know I've been talking for a while. The last caveat is like, you still need people to be able to earn reputation without having access to that money. And I feel like that's something we've done well so far through just reviews that are free.
Go on, Brad.
Yeah, I just view it as like different levels, right? Like, and I think that's kind of how you've articulated it in the actual product itself, right? Like, it's like, oh, I can do some social signaling, and like, you know, I actually had some like very direct conversations around this during early product, right? It's like, okay, controversial figure, Kook, right? Kook is someone that is like very controversial on the timeline. I'm like, man, would I stake money in Kook? Probably not, because he's so volatile. Like that's a big commitment from my side. Would I vouch for him, which I have on Ethos? I would, because I know him personally. Like I know the character that he plays on the timeline. Like I know, so like there's degrees of commitment that I'm willing to make to a certain profile based on stuff. And if there's someone like a legendary B-check, you Serpent, like I would throw money into your stuff because you're both like stable and like universally like appreciated, liked, trusted, whatever. So like that's a safe, stable investment for me, or just like I wouldn't say investment, but a place to hold my money versus other personalities. So like it's just like a spectrum that you've enabled with staking or vouching.
Absolutely. Brad, do you want to just take it there into some of the more product specific questions, if we're going into vouching and some of the other mechanisms that that Ethos have started to implement?
Yeah, I guess for people who don't actually understand like Ethos, the product, or like what it is, right? So it's just you've described it a little bit here, right? It's the ability for us to have a platform on chain and off chain. Actually, most of it's on chain, to socially signal and sometimes monetarily signal for certain other players that we appreciate them or don't appreciate them, don't trust them, don't trust them or don't trust them. Now, the actual product itself is made up of two components, right? There's the one that's just like the pure reputation layer, which would be like Ethos Network, right? So I go on there, I can write a review for you, I can vouch money in you, your profile specifically. I know right now it's based on just X profiles. So like I come in, I sign up, it's my X profile, it'd be Bread Guy tied into my account. I have an on-chain address on the back end, or I can sign in and tie an address to it, right? And I go from there. People can do thumbs up, thumbs down, all that stuff, and I can review not only people but like brands, companies, whatever. And then you can slash people, right? So you can have the attempt to go after someone and say, hey, this person's reputational score is actually out of line with what I believe their reputation should be relative to everyone else, and I can risk my own to deduct other people's. And then there's a second component, which is called Ethos Markets, right? And that's actually something that you guys just opened up recently, so that it's permissionlessly market creating, I guess is the weird way you would say that. And it's like I can almost have a poly market for the trust score of myself, my profile, right? So like I can go and say market starts at 50% trust or 50% distrust, and you can go and actually like buy shares or shares of either side of that to drive the price in that direction, right? So if I buy a bunch of I trust this person, my trust percentage would go up, and then it would go from 50 cents on the dollar to 60 cents on the dollar for what I put into that thing. And like you have opportunity to make money. So like there's the lizard brain, monkey brain, whatever you want to call it. Like I can make some money on this because I think the market is mispricing someone's trust score in a market. And then there's just like the actual social like clout brain side of the world, which is like, okay, I have the vanity stuff, I have the actual reviews, reputations, whatever. Which is a good way to articulate your product. Is there anything I'm missing there? Which of those two? I know you and I thought the lizard brain thing was what was going to like send you guys, right? I was a little skeptical that people just wanted to do the vanity stuff for the sake of vanity, but people have actually grabbed onto that pretty damn hard. I think because it exposes a little more, right? There's more information there, and like by writing a review, it's a little more controversial. It's shareable. It's all this stuff. But well, how would you like the reception? Talk about it.
No, I mean, that was perfect. I think, Ethos Markets is one of those things that we don't get to talk about a lot because like Ethos Network consumes most of the content now. And I actually think it has a lot to do with, again, more human nature. Like people care about what they say, what is said about them. They understand the value of social reputation, and the ability to like flex that or have someone observe that is really powerful. And then I think also a little bit of the vindication side of like, oh yeah, I did not like that guy, or I hated that guy. Now I have like a chance to go be a small account and call someone out and have, a voice in the equation, even though I don't have the 100,000 views on my tweets. I also thought Ethos Markets was going to be the lizard brain thing that drove Ethos. And the number of conversations I had with like very smart people that are like, well positioned in the space that were like, Ethos Markets is it. You solved the problem. This is how you solve reputation. And they're like, this is amazing. This is 100% how you solve it.
I am people.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Bread Guy's one of the people. And like everyone was like, yeah, this is amazing. This is it. And then like it just didn't get as much traction. Like people aren't as interested. And I think it's not as obvious how to make money, and it's on a bonding curve. So you can't really play order book stuff. Like it's a little bit harder to squeeze out a profit there. But I think Ethos Markets is kind of early. I think it's just hard to wrap your brain around what it is right now. We'll get to a point where I think people get it.
I think upon reflection, right? I think the reason why it is the reverse is because everyone was optimizing for like, you thought you need the money making aspect in order to begin the flywheel. And in thinking of that, I was thinking like the flywheel was a monetary flywheel, and there frankly are just better options. There were better options like meme coins, right? Like I'm gonna go play that casino. I'm not gonna play some weird trust score casino that I have to relearn or whatever. So upon reflection, I think the flywheel is the reputational score flywheel, right? It's like people want to show how reputable they are, and like that's the dopamine thing, and there is no alternative to that in the ecosystem. So that's why they gravitated to that side of the house, because there was no replacement. There was no meme coins of reputation that I could go and just like instantly get 1,000x on my reputation outside of like the timeline and like likes and like whatever. So like you can get kind of that, but yeah. Upon reflection, I think that's ultimately what it was.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Do you intend for those two layers, the Ethos network and the markets, to be stronger connected in the future, so that maybe if there's like a disconnect between your reputational score, which could be very high, but people are distrusting you on the market side, that this has an impact on your scoring in the future?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question. That is how I think about it. It doesn't impact your score right now. The way that it works is like Ethos is a protocol. Ethos Network sits on top of that protocol and it's kind of like a block explorer. And then Ethos Market is like to the side, and it kind of like observes other data and shows Ethos data there, but it's not necessarily driving any information back to Ethos. And the way that I think about it,
you don't highlight a mispricing.
No, we do. Yeah, that's the one thing that we do.
Okay.
Yeah. So like if you pull up Bread's profile right now in Ethos, what you would see is Bread's score, which is probably like super high reputable. if you actually go to his market first, and then in the top right quadrant, there's like Ethos profile. It says 828 reputable or 1928. If you click that profile now, what it will show is it'll show Bread's Ethos network profile, and it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, he's reputable, 1928. And then underneath that, you can see, hey, there's this like this difference between his market and his score. And so what we've been trying to do is say, hey, the score is actually more of like a ground truth. It's the like ideological proof that like he is reputable given consensus of, you know, hundreds of other people, vouched money, stuff like that. And the market is more of the speculation. And so in theory, it's kind of trying to highlight that difference. And right now there's no benefit to playing that difference. Like if there is a difference, you don't get anything by being, other than like potentially arbitraging reputation, you don't really get anything. What's interesting is if you get to a point where you have a ground truth in Ethos network, then you could offer something like perps on Ethos market, and you could use that ground truth as your funding rate. And you could say like, hey, like Bread guy is like, he's super reputable, but he's not reputable enough on the market. And so you could say, hey, we're going to basically incentivize people to long Bread and like make it super expensive to short Bread. And that would get us that would basically be the perps model that most people use. That would get us to a little bit closer point of like, okay, maybe these two things can stay in sync.
All right, I'm gonna flip the script a little bit. I want to throw some challenging questions at you. I know you have like a FUD space that you do occasionally. I was actually, I know you came to me originally as like most of the friend tech people like, hey, original investments, like you want an angel and this stuff. I wasn't positioned to be able to do that, but I was also like generally just a little skeptical. It's like, okay, I don't know how much money people are willing to put into just like doing reputation, right? And like even now, I'm still a little skeptical of like the vouching aspect of this, right? Because as a purely analytical person, I go, I have ETH. Why would I put that ETH in a like to show that someone is reputable when I can go and deposit it into a vault and get another 10% or 15% or whatever? You know, I would have possession of it at least, right? I think even having possession of it is a little more than putting it in someone else in a protocol. What do you see as the potential risks for Ethos as something to continue to grow? And how do you anticipate like making it like profitable as a product, man?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I would say the biggest thing that we've been focused on right now is solving a core customer problem. And the problem is there's a lot of fraud, there's a lot of scams, and it's really difficult to know who to trust in the space and who not to trust. And I look at that as a foundation to the rest of the future business. If we look at ethos.network and the protocol itself, what it is creating is the equivalent of a FICO credit score, but a social credibility score. And what you can do once you have something like that really opens up the door to possibility in Web3. We are not able to do things like have clean and easy over-the-counter deals with each other unless we know each other. We are not able to offer each other competitive lending rates unless you know anything about the other person. We are not able to even identify well who should get access to these tokens or this airdrop or this allocation for an angel check. It's really difficult to understand those things. And the way that I see our business evolving is we view Ethos, the protocol, as a future public good. Like it's a public good that other people can observe and understand and interpret. And we want to build things on top of that public good as Ethos, the company. And what we intend to do with that are things like, again, the biggest problem spaces of trust. Hey, this is a new project that's launching. Like, who is behind it? Why are these people behind it? What do they put any skin in the game when they decide that they're going to back this new thing that's launching? Hey, I want to do an over-the-counter deal with someone. I want to pre-sell by X, Y, or Z. Or, hey, I want to go offer someone this competitive lending rate. There are a lot of places in Web3 that get better with trust. And we could say as a company, we're going to go integrate with those things and we'll have other people go build it and they'll just use the Ethos score. But my opinion is we can make just kind of like think about going from Craigslist to eBay. Craigslist itself, and this is just like kind of one vertical, Craigslist was the Wild West, right? And eBay in the early 90s, before it had feedback or anything, was the Wild West too. You were just buying anon from random people. When you go to a trusted marketplace, that's when you can actually create a business around it. When you can go to trusted just interactions, everything that we do is financialized, everything needs to be trusted, then you can offer, better credit rates. Like there's so many things that we can unlock. The difficult thing is we really need to be solid and believe in the public good that we are producing, right? The score needs to be solid.
Yeah, that public good aspect is definitely the way that I started to think about you guys. I think for the people that might be skeptical, I think there's probably two things that seems to be happening at the moment. And I know you're super transparent about this and are kind of figuring out how to address these things, but wanted to give you a chance to speak to it. I think firstly, there's definitely some like gaming of the scoring. And to be clear, these are things that happen in crypto a lot anyway, with like airdrop farming and just creating data, spinning up data out of nowhere. And actually happens in the world, right? People are always trying to figure out ways to game any system. So I think there's a little bit of that going on. And you did this post a couple of days ago, I think, talking about the leaderboard specifically. So I think obviously you've got the individual profiles that generate an individual score, but then when you put it on the leaderboard, people were kind of looking at the leaderboard, just kind of saying, well, I'm sure these people are nice people, and some of them really are. But is that necessarily reflective of maybe the general Web3 community that you're trying to capture? Or has it been either gamed in some way, or maybe some people haven't been participating in the exact way to create like a holistic snapshot that is helpful to people? So how are you thinking about those issues, and how are you thinking about tackling them so that that kind of snapshot data, when you look at the leaderboard, can be better and those numbers can be more solid, as you just described?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, two things to unpack there. The leaderboard itself as a ranking algorithm is kind of misleading, because if I think about what my intent is with Ethos, it is not to say like this person is absolutely more credible than that person. It is more relative speaking, these groups of people that have these traits and characteristics and this type of consensus tend to be more reputable than those people. And when you look at it like a ranking algorithm, which is what a leaderboard is, it kind of misconstrues the concept that it's like a zero-sum game, that only one person can be number one and only one person can be number two. And so it is also helpful though, because a leaderboard does kind of create competition and people will care about their scores more. So as a builder, like I want people to care about their scores. I want them to be competitive about it. So one of the things that you'll see us ship soon is like a different leaderboard, more of a set of leaderboards. A general leaderboard of everyone and hey, these people are the most reputable doesn't actually help you that much. You need more localization. And so you think about categories of things like, hey, who is the most reputable VC in the space? Or who is the most reputable NFT upcoming project? Those are the kinds of things that I think about right now in terms of like making that leaderboard. So it doesn't feel as much as a ranking algorithm of like a bunch of stuff pulled into the same bucket when they shouldn't be. The second thing is like, well, now I forgot it. We were talking about the leaderboard, but I forgot there was another point that you made about, gamification. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
just like people generally trying to game the system, get a higher score.
I mean, come on, we're in crypto, right? Like I think about Bitcoin mining, right? Bitcoin mining was all about gaming the system. It was like, how did you optimize your hash rate? Like this is what proof of work is good at, is getting people to optimize their hash rate and figure out how to solve the algorithm, crack the code. And what I would say about gamification, first off, is like, you're never going to solve 100% of fraud. You're only going to solve 99% of it, or 99.9% of it. And I don't even consider it fraud. It's just people who have figured out how to gamify it better than others. And I think that the game right now is shallow, to be honest. Like, whenever there are ways that the guys at the top of the leaderboard, to be fair, they have a lot of popularity. They're leaders of groups and they have a bunch of people that follow them. It's kind of popularity. Popularity and reputation do go hand in hand a lot. You don't really hear of people that aren't popular that have a significant amount of reputation. And so I think in the data, you look at those guys and you're like, that actually reflects, in theory, what should be true. 155 reviews, 55 vouches for $20,000. Like that sounds reputable, right? But they have gamed it for the most part, not explicitly, but like they are intentionally trying to increase their score, right? Versus someone like Bread Guy, who I doubt has ever like went out and asked someone like, go write me a review or go vouch for me. And Bread Guy might be just as or more reputable than those people. And so I think that's where it's difficult. But again, I say it's kind of shallow because we haven't really gone super deep on the algorithm yet. I mean, it is very complex already, but there are things that we can do, like, well, what is like the quote that the post that I retweeted actually went into this idea of like, what if you could add a like anti-gamification score to it? Yeah, if you click into that. And what it does is it like adjusts everyone's score for like if it looks like they tried to gamify the system or not. And so like Bread Guy wouldn't have reviewed someone back within 24 hours or sent out a ton of reviews and not had a lot of reviews for himself. Like there are things you could look at. The other thing I think about a lot is distance on a network graph. Like if Bread Guy and I are probably actually pretty close on the like overall Ethos social graph, but like me and someone I've never met before are probably pretty far. If I've never met them before, like that, and I write some content and that content is upvoted by a bunch of other people, then that actually is a really solid indicator of trust versus, hey, Bread Guy and I like wrote each other reviews within 5 minutes and like both upvoted the same thing. And like the appearance of gamification was strong. So you know, we're never going to solve fraud. Like, again, I say fraud, gamification, whatever, like you're never going to solve that 100%. So like, our goal is to prevent that from happening and ensure that like you get the best score, you have integrity in the system, and you'll see us continue to ship updates to ensure that that's true.
I think this is
Sort
one
of
of
going
the
down a rabbit hole on this. Oh, sorry, yeah, finish up Legendary, but I have a point I want to extend.
Yeah, I think this is like one of the most fascinating things because in theory, as you said, you don't need the points. It's not about the question, is Sanjay more reputable than Pix? It's the question, are they generally reputable? And is there the resilient score? We've seen it, for example, and that was like one of my favorite things to see happen is the slashing of Elena. And basically leading up to that, there was like some negative review bombing, and it did not impact her score too much. Like she lost 2% of the negative review bombing, which was great to see because that like gang mentality, that like, you know, mobbing up and trying to attack one person did not work out, which is good because that should not be the case. So in theory, it would be just enough to see, oh, okay, Bread Guy is green, this person is blue, this person is questionable, this person is like deep red. But then again, the fun is to actually have a score that kind of shows, you know, Legendary is less reputable than Zeneca or whatever the outcome is, which doesn't, it's not necessary for that to exist for the platform to work, but it's exactly what then users and degens kind of find fun and make them want to come back and use the platform. And by doing that, actually they make it more reputable because there's like just more data flowing into that. And I feel like this is like one of the biggest challenges you have, balancing between like the fun, which kind of also incentivizes the gamification of that, and then the like measurable quality of what Ethos Network is actually intended to do, and which I think it already does pretty well.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I mean,
Brett, for cutting you off.
Well, let me answer some of those things real quick because I do think that the gamification is important, right? Otherwise, no one would use it. And the biggest thing right now is like we're coming up on 50,000 reviews, which is insane. Like literally going to blow my mind. Like I can't even believe there's that many reviews out there, and I think there's close to 10,000 vouchers. And from my fundamentals perspective, I don't give a shit if you wrote 2 letters in a review. You still wrote the review. Now we can go take that data and analyze it more, right? Like we are very shallow in how we judge that information and look at that information. Now we can go back and say like, all right, cool. OpenAI, here's like 100 reviews for this person. What are the 5 categories that you would describe this person as? They can come from these 25 different categories. Like, is it a trader? Is it a degen? Is it a founder? And I think the other thing that we think about is like, the quality of it. We could judge quality, look at all of the data using AI and say like, what sticks out as quality? What doesn't stick out as quality? What sticks out as unique versus slop? And I think that's where the true power comes in. And that's why I'm like, I would rather have all of the data and have everyone say who they trust and who they don't trust, even if it was crap, because it still helps us create this like untapped market of information that we've never had before.
This place loves relative value. Like so we're always gonna do the relative value thing, peg it to something else. Something that actually you got my mind going on a little bit ago, and I started looking into noticing the adoption, and actually two things. So one, you talked about the 50,000 reviews. I remember early on you were generating like or you had prepared like bots to like actually go and do reviews for you, probably because you had a concern that people weren't going to fill out that actual like
Totally.
the graph itself, right? But like I don't know if they're still going or if
I'm
it's necessary.
not sending them anymore. No, yeah. It was like the
Yeah, you
early
don't-
flywheel. Yeah.
Yeah. You need it in place. And they were actually pretty good. And they're based on like actual information. It wasn't just like reviews for reviews sake. It was based on like Twitter data, whatever. But then the other thing is, you know, you're talking about like social graphs now and value, like how you value these people. It starts to make me think of how Kaito has taken some of this and turned it into an actual profitable business, mostly from a product, like an external product or utilization standpoint, right? Like Mega ETH as a ecosystem, right? We have a Kaito dashboard because it's useful to identify a social graph. It's useful to identify people who are actually valued by the ecosystem, right? And then that gets me back to thinking about the Polkadot fiasco of them paying a bunch of KOLs to go and do stuff. And then I go and I look through like the review scores of a lot of the old heads who you would presume are like very big, very dominant players in the ecosystem, the Gainsies of the world, El Capo, right? These people that actually were paid a shit ton of money. Gainsey wasn't, but El Capo was like shit ton of money to like promote projects. The review's nothing. And like, that's not to say that like, I think their Ethos scores are both gray, just like 1200, middling, whatever, for a massive, massive account. And it shows me, that tells me that either not that they're not trusting, but just that in the current cohort of active participants in the ecosystem, they are not in the thought, right? They're not present in the mind share of people to like go and actually even give a shit enough to give a review on them, right? Like I don't think about Gainsey, which is like kind of indicative of like the power that they might have in a situation where I as a product want to come and actually pay them money to promote something for me. It's like El Capo, whatever. So then you have this world where like, I was like on the fly thinking of it is like, how do you have teams that can leverage this stuff to then like cross-reference or maybe sponsor something to drive like revenue for Ethos as a product to facilitate information gathering for them, because that is valuable. Just it's about quantifying it and packaging it up into a service.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, this is where like, oh yeah, I spent a decade in B2B SaaS. I should probably be thinking about how we can take this data and sell it to someone. That makes sense. Like businesses would die for this data. This is the ultimate sales qualification tool. It's the ultimate marketing qualification tool. And it's very similar to Kaito in that sense of like people with Kaito want to know, like Mega ETH might care, who has the most attention when it comes to tweeting Mega ETH content. Where are they getting that attention from? I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if you guys use the like real Kaito dashboard, Brad, but like as a business, it's so powerful. It's like, I got mentioned in this random Twitter space that I have no idea who these people are. Like, I'll go give that guy a follow or whatever. Like Kaito itself as a tool for product teams or marketing teams or sales teams, crazy powerful. And I like to think of it as we are instrumenting and measuring a different data set than Kaito is. Still relevant, still important, extremely complementary to what Kaito is doing. They are measuring more about, in my opinion, attention and where that attention comes from, and being able to highlight that to different teams, which becomes really valuable with launching products, again, or with the like, hey, I'm a marketing team and how do I like qualify this lead? I think we can do something really similar to that. I think our data set is a little bit different because it shows the reputation side, where maybe it's not that this person has a bunch of influence publicly because they have the ability to drive that attention, but rather they have a bunch of influence because of their reputation, and they never tweet. They never talk about things publicly. They're just well connected and know people. Or this influencer, has a yellow circle around their name because they actually do have a bunch of influence. Like think of like Andrew Tate as an example. He has an incredible reach and ability to drive attention, although most people would argue that his reputation is really poor. And so I think of it as kind of like a, additional data point that I think will be really helpful to businesses. And yeah, you could build an entire business just selling that data to someone. Like, even if it's the same data that's on chain, you're like, well, we packaged it up and it's an API and it's really easy for you to use now. So, or data visualization, like what Kaito does is like they have crazy dashboards that you can build that analyze things across all kinds of different spaces. And so that's the other opportunity for us too. But again, it's kind of, it's a stark contrast from the, like, I'm building a public good, that like, it's like, then I'm also building a B2B SaaS product. Like, they're very different.
I think it's just a back end thing. Like, as I think about that further, like, yeah, like Kaito has the multifaceted one where it's like the front end is like, yeah, cool, you can go look at stuff. For you, that's the review and like seeing the high level scores, whatever. But all of the data visualization and maybe like some of the nuanced stuff, maybe references on the back end. Like, yeah, if you could package that up as just like a monthly sub or something for people to be able to see, I think that maybe there's an opportunity there.
Totally.
I think you mentioned like a couple of interesting things, and I have a couple of questions picking back on that. But going to Kaito, like, I'm a subscriber to Kaito, and this is how I like to use it, is exactly to look at people who I think are interesting and see whom they are following, to discover maybe there's a round going on where I want to invest in about a project I wasn't aware of. And I do the same thing, honestly, on Ethos as well. I go specifically to your profile because we don't have the biggest overlap on like people who we are following, and I'm looking, who are you giving a good review, because those might be interesting people for me to discover. But then you also made this interesting point, like, you're building the public good, but you also see there is an opportunity for there to be a B2B SaaS business. So maybe going exactly into that money layer on the platform, is it important for Ethos at some point to be a profitable business? Do you even want it to be a profitable business as a public good platform or layer that you're building?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good question. The way that I look at it is, a public good is more of a like foundation type business. It's like you have something that you publish, a labs group works on whatever the foundation decides, and I don't imagine it this way, but like there's a DAO that kind of determines, or a committee that determines the direction that the entire protocol works. And I think I see Ethos, there's a part of Ethos that just does that, to be clear. Like, just focuses on pushing the protocol forward, just focuses on ensuring that it is a public good that other people can use, other people can extend to, and can be steered in the right direction. The way that I view the business on top of that, again, it goes back to like, well, it could be B2B SaaS. It could be that we build over-the-counter trading, which is something that we're thinking about working on right now. Or it could be that, like Ethos Markets is a speculative product. You can go trade on it and it makes a bunch of money. I don't know that, like, my most important goal right now is to ensure that the foundation is solid. If we can't set the foundation correctly, like not like the actual foundation, the theoretical foundation, like that lies underneath it in the protocol, that needs to be solid. And that's what we're focused on right now. The businesses that exist on top of it don't have to be incredibly successful for the protocol to be very successful. I think one of the biggest weird things that I've learned about Web3 that is totally different from Web2 is it's the app store play. In Web2, there's the app store play, which is like, I build an ecosystem and then I enable businesses to exist on top of me. And it happens in infrastructure land. Mega ETH has businesses that are building on top of them right now, right? It's really, really hard to pull that off. It is like a totally different world. It is challenging to convince people to take a bet and swing on your infrastructure. And it is really difficult to get people to commit to being on your infrastructure. And the switching cost is usually not that high to get off of someone's infrastructure. Like, it's a different world. And so what I think about that is different about our strategy than if we were in Web 2 is like, I want to be the one that builds a lot of the stuff, because it is really difficult to convince people like, hey, this is worth building on top of. People are just going to go decide to build their own thing, right? We could have built this on top of friendtech data, but we said, no, we're going to go build our own thing. And that's what everyone with an L2 or an L1 is doing now. Like, I'm not going to build on top of that. I'm going to go build my own thing, right? And so like, it's difficult to depend on that. And this is a really like kind of backwards way of answering your question. But like, I do think that those businesses should be profitable for Ethos to be successful, and must exist for Ethos to be successful. But like, none of those things happen if the foundation isn't set correctly. And that is really what our like near-term focus is right now.
Gotcha. Look, we've been running this interview for quite a while, and we could go for so much longer. But we are about to wrap up. I do have 2 more questions on that. So basically, because I love this analogy, there is the App Store, and you're also like happy to build, once the foundation on a technical layer is solid enough, to build some of those apps yourself. Is this then how you envision for the long-term funding for Ethos on a foundational level to be secured by just having some of the premier apps that are being built within your ecosystem?
Yeah, I would say like 100%. Like if you could build a trusted marketplace that like 2 people can trust each other, and whenever someone defects on a trade or exits a pre-sale of something, it actually impacts their credibility score, then you could charge for that, and it would be pretty easy to build a business on top of that. No one has really been able to do this outside of the like pure permissionless like NFT model of like, or Uniswap model of like, I'm buying this thing from another person and it's just through a smart contract. So I think that those businesses will be self-sustaining. It's not even businesses, right? It's just other products that are pretty lightweight. Like it's Web3, it doesn't take a lot to build things. You could copy a lot and leverage a lot of other things in the space. Build those things on top of that foundation, and they do feed back into like what the foundation does. I think you're kind of pushing at like, also like, yeah, like how does Ethos work as a foundation itself? Like, you know, we're taking a fee on staked ETH at the protocol level. There are other ways that we could monetize the protocol level that operate more like gas, if that makes sense. And so like right now, if you go look in the smart contract hard enough, and I doubt anyone has, like we could charge $1 every time you write a review. I don't think that's the right answer, but if we get spammed a lot, it could be. You know, it's like postage, right? Like the way you solve the spam email problem, or the way you solve the spam mail, physical mail problem, is you charge 65 cents or whatever to send a piece of mail. So I think there are a lot of things that could happen at the protocol level that the foundation could actually use and build on top of itself too, and kind of leverage as revenue. And so like there's a 1% fee on staking right now. It doesn't, I mean, there's like $1 million in TVL. That means we've made 10 grand on that. That's not a business, but like, you know, there's only 2,200 people on the platform. You start to scale that. Maybe vouching has more dynamic aspects to it. Like there are ways that we could enable it more at the protocol level to generate revenue too.
Yeah, there's so much potential to go into depth with that, even if you were to combine like, you know, free reviews depending on the score, et cetera, et cetera. But like one final thing that I want to mention before I'm going to hand back to you, Bicek, to maybe have a final question and then close us out is basically you said that, you know, other L1s, other L2s could say, no, I want to build my own reputational layer. So at some point you're becoming very similar in terms of how I think about social media platforms, because you have all the ex competitors, but I'm reluctant to move over because there's nobody there. So if you build this critical mass of reviews and, you know, you have 50,000 of a couple thousand users, which is an insane amount, you will probably get to some point, if this continues, where nobody wants to use another reputational layer because there's nobody there reviewing people, and you have built this stock of users. Is this how you're thinking about the growth? Like very similar to social media platform?
Why do you think it's free? Why do you think it's easy to do right now? Like this is the Web2 growth play. This is what my bread and butter is like, you go give it away for free. Like you have to build the network effect yourself, right? You have to build the moat yourself. Like why would we charge for any of this stuff right now, when that helps us, and it's good for everyone, helps us get to a point where we have network effect and impact. And like, I always think about, I mean, I don't know, maybe aging myself a little bit, but like, I watched Google Plus come and try to compete with Facebook. It was a joke, right? Like I remember everyone being extremely hyped about Google Plus, and you're like, this is a joke. What actually changed Facebook versus Instagram was more, Instagram was like a different medium, a different piece of content type. It became a different way of sharing information, and Facebook could not be competitive with it. Instagram built up such a network effect that it became became super competitive to Facebook, even though they were solving different problems. It was taking the same attention that you had in terms of social media, and people would come in and they try to replicate Facebook, and it wouldn't work. It wasn't ever going to work. The network effect became Facebook's moat really early on. And so if we can have a similar thing where like, wow, we have a ton of reviews, people already have their reputation there. Are people going to go ask the same people to review them on another site? Are you going to go write another review for Bread Guy on, you know, the other sites? Like maybe, like if you think there's some sort of incentive there for doing so. But I think the data and the people become the moat, and it's not an easy moat to build. It's like it's actually really tough in Web3 to build moats at all. Because you could just rip off the smart contract. Like, I'm just going to fork this shit and take it somewhere else. Like users and data become the moat. And so and people could do that with ours too. They could actually fork our review contract, bring all the data with them and say, here's a better UI. And like, yeah, like it's debatable on if that's good or bad for us, but like, I think that's how I think about our moat is network effect and the data that we're building right now. And that's why we give it away.
You're building up the switching costs, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
and
it's
like
really interesting.
Because most people's moat is like price or like speculation, like those things don't keep your attention for very long. Like I think one of the things I'm most proud of right now is like our week 8 retention rate is like 65% right now, which is like, that is a really good product. Like you usually have like 10% retention after week 8. And so people are still staying in the loop and they're still writing reviews after week 8. And like, they're still upvoting content. And like, if you can keep people engaged like that over a period of time, then we're doing something right.
It's a really interesting point because I think one of the things that people may have thought initially was because you came so quickly after Kaito and people's brains were like, okay, well, this is a social thing. You know, you've got all of our profiles, they've got a bunch of data, and like in a similar way, you've got a bunch of profiles, you've got all of our data. People were like maybe putting you up as competitors in some way. But I guess what you're showing with that Web2 analogy is like, look, one of them is one thing. We're like doing a different thing, and it doesn't make sense for us to be compared in that way necessarily because we're building up a different way to communicate that information in the same way that Facebook communicated in one way. Instagram was just a different thing and therefore built up its own network effect. So I think that's a really interesting way for people to frame, for people to understand just where you guys are thinking about framing it.
Yeah, Kaito is complementary to Ethos and 100%.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, it is additional data that we've never had before, and that's why I think they work really well together.
Interesting, fascinating stuff. But as you said, we have to round off pretty soon. We've obviously gone through a bunch of stuff to do with product, philosophy, monetary stuff as well, how you're planning to monetize the future plans. But is there anything else you'd like to share before we round off? Sep?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for us is like we learn by shipping. Like our product we built, we put it out there. I want people to attack it. I want people to come to the FUD spaces on Thursdays and say like, this pisses me off. This doesn't make sense. I don't understand why you're doing this. And I think the other flip side of that is like, people tend to think about things as very hype oriented with stuff like, oh, I'm super hyped for this thing. And then I stopped using it, and you build up all this hype, but they're just like, no one cares anymore. And we are not that at all. And that means like, we need your feedback and be patient with it too. Like we are going to build this alongside everyone. The data isn't going to be great or amazing to start. This is something that we all have to build together. And it is a very different thing to like turn that upside down in crypto and be like, no, you got to think for the long term here. Like this isn't about the next three days. This is about the next 10 years, right? And so when you're thinking about Ethos, I would just encourage everyone to think about it that way. Like bring your feedback to us. And remember, this is a long-term thing that only gets better with time. We just have to continue to improve it every day.
Excellent stuff. So as you said, let's if you want to follow along, it's at ethos_network. So thanks so much for joining us. It's been a really, really interesting conversation. I hope that's provided like a whole load of context and answered a bunch of questions that people are interested in. And as you said, if you want to get involved, those FUD spaces on Thursdays, join and contribute and participate. I think that'd be super helpful. Thanks so much for joining us,